everyone, and welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. For a couple of weeks now, we've been discussing the maltreatment of Nigerians and Africans in China as relates to the coronavirus, to which the Chinese government has denied reports that people of China have been discriminating against Africans, despite videos online first showing Nigerians and Africans who've been kicked out of their hotels and having been under compulsory quarantine for 14 days, even after a previous quarantine period. And then people being thrown out of paid apartments and being turned back from entering public places such as shopping malls and so on. Here was the Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyeama, the previous week, explaining what he had found out following conversations with the Chinese authorities.
There's, an effort to contain an outbreak of COVID-19. Yes, that, some of those that came into the country then tested positive were Africans, but that was absolutely no reason whatsoever to completely, trespass on the rights and the dignity of Nigerians and Africans in the city. We've seen in videos and films of people having their blood taken. That, as far as I understood, that the way for testing for this virus, was through the nose and the throat. Swabs up the nostril and in the throat. And, we're seeing these pictures, and I was also informed, by our people there, that people were being taken in and having their blood taken and so forth. And that it appeared, in many cases, that it was only the Africans and Nigerians who were being, who were experiencing this kind of treatment.
Now here's a minister late last week during the daily briefing of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, spitting fire, calling a red line on China's actions against Nigerians and Africans in China.
We have been engaging with the Chinese government at various levels. At the level of our consulate in Guangzhou, which is where these cases of discrimination and racism have been taking place, and also at the federal level in China, in Beijing, with our ambassador and our embassy in Beijing. Now, we've made it clear to the Chinese government in no uncertain terms, unequivocally, that under no circumstance will we accept racial discrimination against Nigerians or indeed Africans or blacks in China.
So what changed from sounding cooperative with China last week and now calling a red line? I want to bring in Permanent Secretary at the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Keshi, to discuss this. Ambassador Keshi, thank you for joining us on the program. What do you make of the situation between Africans and the people of China as concerns discrimination and the myth of Africans being carriers of COVID-19?
Thank you, Amarachi, for having me. To start with, I think it's unfortunate, very unfortunate to start with, because China is the last country to accuse anybody of being a carrier, because we all know, the whole world knows that the coronavirus came out of China to the rest of the world. But I also think that there must have been a lot of misinformation and a lack of knowledge, particularly on the part of the Chinese. Their knowledge of Africa, I believe, is very, very limited. And I think this is unfortunately one of those things that Africans go to when they go to new countries, or when they're in countries that people don't know so much about the African people. Certainly, we are not carriers. It came out from China, and the Chinese are the last to accuse anybody at all of being the origin of the coronavirus.
I know you've been following the developments closely, and I would like for you to talk about the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyeama's response to the Chinese government when he talked about a misunderstanding of the quarantine periods, and now he calls a red line on the reports of discrimination.
I know that there's been a lot of comments about this, and I think most of the comments are as a result of the fact that people don't really know exactly how the foreign ministry or the minister himself react to issues like this. Number one, the foreign minister certainly, and I can assure you, no foreign minister anywhere in the world will react based, on the stories or newspaper reports or radio or television reports. Yes, they will listen to it. They will take it into account. Based on that, they would actually call and send messages, to their representatives outside the country to give them the first-hand knowledge of what is going on, what is happening on the ground. So I believe very strongly that the foreign minister was reacting. I mean, given that people wanted quick reaction and action taken, he was reacting based on the information he was receiving, from the people on the ground. And as the story changed or things change, and he gets a very good picture of what the situation was like, I think he also tried to inform the public. I want to make it clear, and I'm sure he didn't set out from the beginning to mislead the people. He didn't set out to please the Chinese. I think he was just reacting based on the availability of information, and at the time those information or the information was available to him. So that's why you see that his first reaction was probably different from the reactions he made later.
Do you think China's investments in Africa makes it difficult for African leaders to take on a tough stance against the country, even if these allegations of discrimination are true?
No, absolutely, absolutely. You see, the allegations and the misbehavior of certain elements, within the Chinese society against the Africans, actually put a lot of pressure on the African leaders who are dependent. Look, most of the countries on the continent are dependent on the Chinese for one thing or the other. Look, we get a lot of loans from the Chinese. A number of quite large number of goods, cheap goods, that are sent to all these countries. They also enable the respective leaders to maintain some stability. Because of the cheapness of the items, they can at least afford quite a lot of, their people can afford quite a number of things. So when this crisis, develop, the leaders would have to find a way of managing it in order to continue to maintain relationship with the Chinese.
Meanwhile, Ambassador, China is trying very hard to make the rest of the world believe its reaction and response to the coronavirus was timely, which is why it's been effective. I mean, their response to the coronavirus has been effective in the country, despite accusations of some groups and countries, such as the United States, that have tried to hide information about the coronavirus.
Maybe it's true the Chinese initially tried to hide the information. But look, this is not the time for us to engage in a blame game. To start with, I want to believe that the Chinese were equally caught unawares when the crisis started. There are controversies whether it started in the market, which apparently at the end of the day might be the correct story. Or some have said, it came out of some lab researches that went wrong. In fact, I'm sure you must have also read some conspiracy that said that the experiment actually started from the United States and was transferred to China. Look, these are all speculations. But the point still remains that the Chinese responded as much as they could. But if you want to go into the game blame, the rest of the leaders around the world should also accept high responsibility for the death of their citizens. The Chinese had no time to prepare, but they responded adequately. The rest of us, the rest of the world had adequate time to prepare. December, January, February, April. We had leaders all over the world had adequate time to prepare for this thing, but they did not. In some countries, the leaders were in denial. The president of America said it would go away in April. Boris Johnson did not take quick action to lock down the United Kingdom. Italy was nonchalant. I mean, you can see the steps that were missed by various successive leaders around the world. And of course, as in Africa, you know very well about this. So let's not go into the blame game.
Now, no one is talking about cutting ties with China, but can China be reprimanded for any of the issues raised?
Well, of course, there's absolutely no reason why we cannot reprimand the Chinese for the maltreatment of Africans. No, there are channels through which this can be done, and I guess the statement of the foreign minister that we have to draw a line sends a very strong signal to the Chinese that they have to be very careful and they have to rope in, their citizens about the treatment that they meted out to Africans. But as a matter of fact, if you look around the world today, particularly in the continent, the Chinese in the continent are misbehaving as well as those at home. So the Chinese leadership must do a lot to educate the people they are sending out to Africa. What we need to do in order to stop all this nonsense, in my view, is for us to develop ourselves. Look, we've lost opportunities in so many ways. And if we do not seize the opportunity of this virus to become an adult, to grow, to be able to produce, manufacture a lot of things ourselves, and not dependent on these countries. Listen, if there's another virus attack, we will still go through the same process and we'll be back again saying that a country discriminated against us, they treated us this way, why shouldn't we reprimand them?
Ambassador. While Nigeria is cooperating with international protocols when dealing with the infections, it still falls short on issues such as testing and providing adequate isolation centers when compared to other African countries. Is the country, talking about Nigeria now, doing much better, or are we still far behind to be near enough to be relaxing restrictions aimed at curbing the coronavirus?
Well, look, I don't think it has had any strong impact on our foreign policy. This is a health crisis to start with, and I think it's been addressed, that way. At the end of the day, when this is all over, our relationship with the Chinese will still be strong. It will return to to some normalcy, so to speak. But look, as I said, in this continent, in this part of the world, we should be grateful. We are sure luckier than the Italians, than the British, and than the Americans. Why? Because it came late to the continent. It came late to Nigeria. And in all this, we had enough time. We had adequate time, to take care of, to prepare and to make arrangements to be able to, do one or two things. But again, I sincerely hope that someday we can expand this discussion and begin to find out why were we not seriously affected. It all shows you that we are not affected more because we are still at the periphery of the global development. Because if you compare us and compare what happened, now there are statistics, hundreds, thousands, millions actually of Chinese fly to Europe, millions fly to the United States. How many actually come to this country? It was our big shots, who brought this from all sorts of places into the country. And they came in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But in the case of the United States, they came in thousands and millions. So you can see where we are relatively luckier. But in terms of opening up, well, so far we've been doing cut and paste, and I'm sure that's what we are going to do again. So let me also do the same thing and say that, look, we should be smart in trying to open up.
Ambassador Keshi, thank you again for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much.
When we come back after the break on Diplomatic Channel, the number of coronavirus infections and deaths is still on the rise globally. So why are some countries losing restrictions aimed at curbing its spread? with us.